Welcome to the Winter Show, to our In Dialogue series. I'd like to make a special thanks to the Athena Art Foundation for helping to put this wonderful panel together. I'd love to introduce our moderator. This is Jonquil O'Reilly. I'm going to step on the side so I can show her off. She's wearing one of our panelists' wonderful fashions, Victor de Souza. But Jonquil will introduce everyone. I just wanted to take a moment to say thank you all for coming to support the Winter Show. All proceeds from the Winter Show go to directly support those most in need and to support Eastside House Settlement, which is a wonderful organization located in the South Bronx that helps our fellow New Yorkers really receive both the nourishment for the mind and for the body that they need to lead healthy and happy lives. So thank you very much for your support. Thank you to our panelists for being here, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much. Well, I like arms. Our panelists are Eleni Carnegie-Lopes, I knew if I looked at you, I immediately not be able to say it, who's a specialist in historical fashion and textiles in the Ratty Center at the Metropolitan Museum. We have Victor de Souza, who is a New York-based fashion designer. Patrick Bavesi, who is director here at the Hyde Park Antiques, and I think we can visit your booth.
Yes.
Make sure you go visit. And Edward Lebrano, who is an interior designer here in New York. I wanted us to think about today just how cultural shifts, economic shifts, social shifts change how we dress ourselves and how we dress our homes, and how when there are large changes, let's take for example the coming of the millennium, when everyone's sort of anticipating what's going to happen with the millennium bug, everyone had this idea of futurism, and we saw that fashion became very sleek, very futuristic, very modern, and similarly in our homes it was the same. Then take, say, the financial crash of 2008, when in response to the austerity that we were seeing economically, fashion became sort of more of a return to the 80s, to costume jewelry, to shoulder pads, to sort of a more ostentatious look. And now what are we seeing here? I mean, with the pandemic, and none of us want to harp on about the pandemic too much, but it has changed, it's forced all of us to change gears. I think with the initial lockdown, and us being stuck in our homes, it meant that a lot of us were, for the first time in a long time, we actually had time to take stock, to look at the furniture that was around us, and maybe things that actually we'd always hated, but we'd never had the time to look for the proper piece. Or also the different roles that we were having to sort of use our homes for now. Whereas maybe our New York apartment was just a pied-à-terre, or maybe it was just our home that we escaped to after work. Now it was forced to be, I mean, for some of us it was a prison. For some of us who accidentally had 2 babies, it was just a constant nursery. But it became a sanctuary, but it also became our studio, it also became our workplace. It became the place that we had to entertain ourselves, whether it be just ourselves on our own, or on Zoom. And now we're seeing a shift again. When we're able to open our homes for the first time, it's meaning we're all thrilled to be able to go out, but perhaps now for the first time in a while, we're actually quite excited to have people come into our homes and to invite them over to entertain them, because we've had the time to get them looking the way that we've been wanting to for maybe quite a few years and just haven't got around to. What I want to sort of us to think about, for starters, is the speed at which these fashions change. Certainly in past centuries, fashion in particular changed very much slower pace than today. How, Elena, do you see that reflected in the clothes that are in your collections? And how do you see that they were sort of more intended for reuse and to be repurposed and to be adjusted for new wearers over time?
Well, a big part of my job at the Ratty Center is working with students who are learning about textile history and fashion history and coming in to look at extant objects. And the thing that we emphasize primarily is just how valuable these things were. I think it's hard for us to wrap our mind around today. Students are often shocked to learn that at least in Western European homes during the early modern period, which is my specialty, basically the costliest thing that someone would have in their home would be their bed linens. And you see that reflected in inventories. And that really surprises people, that bed linens could be more than their furniture, more than anything else, sometimes even than their home. And so this really alarms people. And you see this reflected in the use of textiles in that they were so valued. They were so valuable that they would pass them down through generations, they would pass them down to family members, or they would use them utterly and completely until they were only fit to be sent to rag mills and turned into paper. So they really treated things differently. And the sort of modern mindset in thinking about that is that we see it as frugality. But if you think about something that is an investment today, like a car, if you dent your car, you're not going to discard it and buy a new car. You're going to repair it and continue to use it because you value your investment in that. And that's how people treated and thought about textiles and fashion historically, is that they were really an investment object.
I think the time and the skill that went into the production of these things, and then the fact that they're portable means that they're really useful to use essentially as currency for exchanging as gifts. And as you say, you see that reflected over and over in inventories, which is so interesting. And Patrick and Edward, what do you see as the shifts in interiors? Do you find that in the modern era today, that interiors shift along with fashions at the same pace? Do they move slightly slower? And are they shifting today much quicker than they would have done, say, 50, 100 years ago?
Well, interior, it takes more time to do an interior.
Use the microphone.
So, I'm sorry, and where you push this?
Just.
No. It takes more time to do an interior than it does to create something quickly that's just fashionable. I will say this, I tell clients this all the time, we're in the fashion business, more so today than we were 20 years ago. Fashion does change. For instance, a few years ago, everybody that came to me wanted gray. And it was like, please, not one more gray house. Everybody's going to look alike. But that was the color of what was going on. So today, color affects us a lot. Whatever the fashionable color is, people come to you and want that color in their homes, which is the one thing that changes in interior design quickly. In terms of our business, though, we are in the fashion business. You've got companies like Restoration Hardware and all these companies that produce really good-looking things that I look at as just another resource. But they've really affected our business and how quickly it changes and what people are willing to spend for things and what they're willing to. Years ago, like textiles, they bought a D'Angelo sofa and they paid a lot of money for it. And I still have a D'Angelo sofa in my living room. I bought it 35 years ago. It just gets recovered. Today, they don't really care, which is a little bit for me a problem, not because of the money involved, but because of the quality of what you get and how it's done. So fashion affects us in a big way. It's become much more contemporary the last few years, but it always goes in and out. Things swing back and forth. Right now, the greatest value in the world in terms of interior design is traditional furniture. You buy it for nothing. You want a beautiful house and spend nothing on it? Go buy beautiful traditional 18th century
Taking
furniture.
to show, guys.
And I believe in that. The modern stuff is, I love it, but it's gotten so expensive that even a lamp that they made $3,000 of is selling for $18,000. At some point when 18th century furniture started selling that way, people began to move to modern interiors. So things swing back and forth, but yes, we're very much in the world of fashion. It just changes a little more slowly because of how long it takes to take effect in the interior design.
Yeah, speaking to Ed's point, we've noticed an uptick in our very, very traditional conservative business in the last 2.5 years, largely because of quarantine, where our clients were sort of forced to reevaluate their interiors, sort of staring at sideboards, below tables, or whatever, thinking maybe this wasn't the right one. And fortunately, we remained open during that period and could accommodate. I know I was sitting in my own living room with my wife looking at things, sort of endlessly wondering, maybe it's time for an upgrade, but putting that on the scale of our clients, we were quite active with just, it was an accelerated interest in things they already had. But like Ed says, I've been done this long enough to see the cyclical sort of trends towards traditional things again. Unfortunately, it's happening, but it's not without having to give them a sense of fashion. You'll see our booth upstairs. We've done some upholstery, which is slightly unconventional, but it has piqued an interest in items that would by and large be overlooked otherwise. It really is a case of marketing.
I'm really interested to come back to that point because both of you mentioned recovering reupholstering. And I want to come back to that in sort of talking about how we reuse and how we need quality for that. Before that though, I couldn't help but notice the eyebrows shoot off the top of your head, Victor. You had the eyebrows shot off the top of your head when we talked about fashions being sort of more rapid. And I know that when you speak about your own fashion, you speak about your own designs, the word you use over and over again is timeless.
Timeless, yes.
And investing in quality. When you're sort of looking to create something, whether it's bespoke for a client or for me, or to wear at a panel, or when you're looking for just creating a new piece, what's your ideal wearer, and what do you want them to be to have in mind when they're looking to you for designs?
Well, for me, when I create something, I really want it to be timeless. And I think it's how you can make that. And I think it's almost if it's the opposite of trends. I know what's going on, I like trends, but for when I do my own things, I take out the trend out. And it's more like a nostalgia feeling, and things that I like from the past, and things that I adore, and how can I bring it to today and be super wearable, super interesting, but have that kind of feeling of old world. I get it. It's that idea of having pieces that people can. I mean, wearing your dress today, yes.
So many people have come up to me and talked about it. It's having things that are unusual that then it doesn't necessarily sit within a specific season. And I think it's the same with when you're going for antique furniture.
Absolutely.
It's not necessarily sort of identifiable as a specific year or a specific moment.
And something that also, that people cannot really say, oh, this is last spring.
Mm.
So it became like kind of something that you discard. Instead of that, you invest in a piece that you can wear in 10 years and it have the same energy and the same excitement. And that's what I really work hard. I don't really wanted to people buy my clothes and then it's like, oh, she's wearing like, I don't know,
Last
fall
year's.
2021. I feel like that kind of thing is getting even more faster with social media and all the images that we are bombarded all the time, and it's like how we can change
I think so. I think
that mentality. Like on the old time, my grandmother, she used to buy pieces to complete her wardrobe. She didn't buy pieces to be updated with a new look. She got her own style, and she applied a few pieces here and there.
I think a couple of things I wanted to pick up on there. One of them is the word discard, because with fast fashion, as we know, I think currently a lot of designers have had to take stock and think about the materials that they're using, to think about how do they feel about the fact that in preparing new collections for every new season, they're feeding into this idea of needing to constantly be consuming. And then you talked, when we were on the phone, you talked about this explosion of craft. As when we were at home looking at the sideboard that we hated forever, and suddenly trying to see if Patrick can find us a new one, whilst we were baking our sourdough or just having loads of children. One of the other things that lots of people started to do is look to craft. I think because it was therapeutic, we needed new things to do because we couldn't go to bars. But it gave us something to do with our hands. It gave us something to work on. But I think in that, do you think that's given us a new appreciation for the handmade, or for the sort of reusing, for mending, and that kind of thing?
Well, I have many thoughts on that, but first I just wanted to sort of reply a bit because I was so inspired by both of what you said, that I think part of why things are so easily discarded today is because we don't tailor them to ourselves anymore, and that was such a given. Why would you buy fast fashion and then tailor and mend it when that's more costly than the value of the object itself? You know, why would you reupholster an inexpensive couch when that's more expensive than the value of the object? So I think, you know, this sort of this return to making that has happened in the past couple of years has really helped people to appreciate the value of investing in things and how differently people used to treat things that they purchased and lived with. So for me, like all of us, you know, I made sourdough. I had a vegetable garden in the first few months of the pandemic, and I think it makes so much sense that I'm a lace maker, and lace makers, maybe it seems like anachronistic that we would be super tech savvy, but in fact, the lace community really rallied and all came online, and there's been this enormous resurgence.
community.
Yes,
I
there's
see
been
it.
there's been this huge resurgence of all kinds of makers online that are able to learn new skills because of the virtual world. And it's one of those things where, you know, it makes sense when you're at home in isolation. You want to create something with your hands because what is more human than making something? So I think it really makes sense. And then once you've made something by hand, or you've handled, you know, an antique, you really can't go back anymore. It changes
Yeah.
your worldview.
You understand the value. Yeah.
Exactly, understanding the value and understanding your investment.
Well, I think a lot of people too, during the pandemic, people who were working in other careers, other jobs, busy doing something else, found themselves at home, and even though they might still be working virtually, they found lots of time to start other things. There's a lot of new things that have come up that are sort of artisan, that wouldn't have been there except when people were sitting at home with not enough to do, and they'd always wanted to create something, so they did, and now they're for sale. One of the things, though, that you know, Victor said it, and I hope I can remember what he said. I'm getting old, but you know, in terms of things being timeless, when someone comes to me and says, "I want the color of the season," I run for it. That is the one color I won't put in their house because it's going to look dated the next year. When it's out of fashion, it's gone. Your house, that sofa that everybody had, it's like years ago. Halston or somebody made a black dress that had a bow on it that was strapless, and everybody had it. And when you see someone in that dress, even the next year, you thought, why are you still wearing that dress? You know, so you sort of run from those. You sort of run from those things in the design. At least I do in the design world too. And I never want to do the same room twice. I don't use fabrics. I have friends who. Every house you see, they've got the same curtains in every room. I try never to use the same fabric for anybody in the next house. Otherwise, you're creating restoration hardware, which I love, by the way. It's at the chairman's house. But it all looks alike. And when everybody's house looks alike, haven't you taken the fun out of this or the excitement out of it? Victor, I'm sure his clients wearing that sort of thing, which is fabulous, by the way.
Thank you.
You don't see it, you're not going to see that dress at every cocktail party you go to.
No.
That's, for me, if I'm going to spend a lot of money on clothes or doing my house, I don't want to look like Jane's house.
Right.
I
Absolutely.
want my own house. I want it to be about me, and when it all looks the same, boy, all that wasted money.
Well, that's excited for exciting for a firm like mine, working with individuals like Ed, with designers with a great vision to help create those environments that are not replicated easily or at all. I like to think that the specialists in this building today have brought things that you can't just run down the road and find another one.
Of course.
And that's what makes it exciting. Speaking to something you said about the reaction to what's popular and sort of jump to the other side of it, that's what I think our business has benefited from in a mindset where mid-century modern, and not to diminish it in the slightest, it's just where it seems to run the magazines, the shelter magazines. Every page you turn, the reaction to that has benefited our business of traditional things, where I don't want another mirror top console table. Maybe I'll look at what people call sort of derogatorily brown furniture, but that stands the test of time. So our sales of late have been just that, a reaction to what is often published.
And And also, I think, people have seen it. And so that's
Yeah.
great. I love it all. I do it. I love modern. I do modern. I don't get asked to do it very often. But if Victor was designing another dress for you, and let's say he used that as a basis, it's never going to be the same dress. I can use what we did 20 years ago as a basis for what we do. It's not the same design.
Yeah.
It always comes back differently. And what comes back is a different way of treating English furniture. We were talking about it earlier. I was down at 200 Lex yesterday, and he has a chair, beautiful pair of chairs that have, and they're 18th century chairs, and he has this fabric on them that have big red lips on them. Well, it's using something that is elegant, that's pretty, but using it in a different way. It never comes back the same way.
I think it takes guts to do that, though, doesn't it? It takes guts for you to do that yourself, and it takes guts for your clients. They sort of, do you find they need a bit of hand-holding for that?
That's really exciting to Lions, is showing them there are other ways to do things, because
Yeah.
they come in with a set ideas on how traditional things should look, but in actual fact, they should look just the opposite. They should raise eyebrows. They should not make a run for the hills, but sort of stand back and sort of think, I can live with this.
Yeah.
Actually, it makes my life more interesting.
Well, that's it. I think that sort of ding, a question for you, Victor, because I imagine that most of the people that come to you for your designs, they already know the kind of designer that you are, so they're not coming to you and asking you for a little black dress. But
Definitely not.
but
Well, I could send it to another.
But do you find that you have to sort of push people a little bit further?
Yes.
Certainly with me, when I went to see you yesterday in your studio, you said to me, sort of, you pointed
think it's
towards
like-
this and you said, "This is too much." Yes, I was like, no. Nothing is too much. But
I see something and it's come to my mind that will look great on you. But sometimes the person is a little scared. But I want to come back a little bit of what it is to create something that is different. You really have to love what you do.
yeah,
Because if you take the easy way, you will do the same chair and maybe change the pillow.
yeah,
But if you want to redo that chair, you can inspire on that, and it's a harder process to create that chair, but don't look at that chair. And not many people want to do the process.
yeah, of course.
And I think that's the value, is the timing, is the passion, is the love that you put on, that creates something different. But, it is hard work.
Yeah, it's hard work.
If you're kind of lazy, I don't think you want to
If
do
there's-
anything different.
There's a negative today. It's that, as Victor said, you can recreate something, you can take the chair and you can make it into something else. The problem today, everybody wants it fast. Nobody wants to make the effort.
Yeah.
That becomes a real problem for me in this business, because it's not what I got in this business to do. And they don't care. I have clients that say, "I don't care. I don't care." Well,
That's painful.
why are we doing this? And why are you spending all this money if you don't care?
Yeah.
Which is kind of a little bit sad. I mean, it's fine, I make a lot of money, but it's sad
But
that
it's a
somebody would
huge
take
amount
that
of
approach.
work for
I don't
you,
care. I have a
and-
client right now that says, "I don't care. Put any chair you want. I don't care what you do to the chair." But it should be done this way. I don't care. It's fine like that. No, it's not. But you don't get it. And that's what's happened also in the world of fashion and everything else today. Is that I go to parties sometimes. I went to a party a couple of years ago on Park Avenue, big whole floor apart, 2-floor apartment, and I looked at the women there and I thought, where do you buy these clothes? We have the greatest stores in New York, and you look like you came from Safeway. I mean, we've all got zillions of dollars, and why aren't you? I mean, what are you wearing? This is literally 4 people in the room look fabulous, and the rest of you look
They
like
look bad. Yeah.
Everyone
I
mic
agree.
drops, leaves the party.
So it's unfortunately something that also comes along with the change in the world and the speed at which things are changing, is people spend less time thinking about making it special.
I think that's something that we have had to think about, or that we've been forced to reckon with, is delays, with supply chain issues, and with ever sort of lengthier delivery times. Maybe it's forced all of us to think we've got to wait however long for a piece of furniture or for a dress that we wanted, it's maybe making us think, actually, then maybe I can wait and go to somebody who can find me the right thing. Maybe I can get something and have it tailored. So that sort of thing, I think. But in order to do that, in order to take things and repurpose them for yourselves, adjust them, they need to be quality. They need to be made with extra room in the ceilings. They need to be able to sort of withstand multiple wearers. And what do you think about that, Elena? Is it something that you see, something you see yourself in the clothes that you wear?
Well, I mean, I think to a certain extent, to each their own, not everyone can invest in that kind of thing, and everyone has a different personal style. But I will say that I'm not sure this is exactly answering your question, but it's just what was sticking at the top of my mind, is that one positive thing that I'm seeing is that I think, like today we're living in this world where it's very disposable, people are used to things very fast. Absolutely, it is like we've gone to the farthest extreme. And now we're living in this world with, the metaverse and NFTs and this totally virtual thing happening. But simultaneously, the one extreme always brings the other. And so I'm really seeing on the other end of things, this really resurgence in people who are really interested in slow fashion and investing in handmade things. And of course, that's not going to be everyone. But there is certainly a growing trend of people who are really interested in having things custom made for themselves. And buying unique things and creating personal style. It's something I'm seeing a lot with Gen Z on TikTok, actually. There's much more emphasis on personal style. And I don't see that as a flash in the pan trend. I really see it as a cultural shift that it's just starting to happen. It's not, it's not in the mainstream, but I'm seeing the beginnings of that, and I really think that's signs of what's to come.
I think you're right. I think it is, as you said, it's a cultural shift. It's not something that's just happening at the moment. But also, just to go back to something you said about it not being for everybody. When we're talking about investing in fashion or investing in, it's not just about sort of the budget that you have. I'm thinking back to when I was at high school, or just school as we call it where I come from, or at university when obviously I had no money, but I was interested in clothes, and so I would buy things from second-hand shops or from Bernardo's or from the thrift stores, and I taught myself to tailor. Again, that's not something that everyone can do or would want to do, or else just use safety pins to sort of gather things up, like my old Victorian skirts that I'd find in the back of a charity shop.
Absolutely.
So it's sort of something for every level, and that investment, it doesn't necessarily have to be financial, but it almost always involves an investment of time and of thought, and just taking a bit more, just making a bit more of an effort to find those things that are an expression of you. I know, Victor, you mentioned about it being easy to find something sexy or to sort of dress in a sexy way, particularly if you have a specific body type. But tell me a bit about sort of what you...
For me, sexy is kind of easy. It's lazy. Not attractive or stylish. I'm always do my clothes with the concept of heroic, which is much more the fantasy of what's going on behind what you see. And I see that the person that is showing the women, showing more boobs, maybe somebody see them on the party in the beginning, but that get fade away.
You're talking about Edward's party.
All the parties are the same. But then the person that is well dressed is the one that lasts all night. Everybody goes to that. I see from my dresses. I want to come back to another point that came from you. I feel the future is very uncertain, and AI, and it's kind of scary. And I think the society, that's why we all coming to this nostalgia, because we're going to hold to things that we know and start valuing things that we've seen in the past. Because what do you want to do futuristic? It's like we don't know what's going on with the microchips and inside the people and these cars that, it's like, I think that's kind of, I don't think it's a trend, it's a culture shift or like reset. That is like, let's appreciate good craftsmanship, let's appreciate good furniture. Your house doesn't have to be full of amazing pieces, but you have two pieces that you spend, and people come in and that's the one that everybody talk about it. But you spend more money on that, and you have this beautiful couch. But that two pieces are like wow, or a painting, or you know.
I agree with Victor. I think, a few good things are really, really more important than having a house full of stuff.
Yeah.
I tell people all the time, if you'll buy 3 things that are great, and you don't even have to be expensive, just great design. It's not about money. Great design. Then the rest of it you can fill in with very simple things, but you've made a statement and you'll love living that way.
Well, there's a return on that investment, and it's an emotional one, a romantic one. Like when a client asks you what the color of the year is, or for the hills, when a client tells me they're looking to buy something for an investment, I pretty much shut the door in their face. I would like to.
Please come in.
We're in the recycling business, and obviously we're selling, and we don't suffer any sort of supply chain issues. There's 5 floors right now that things are ready to go today. But when we have a client that has bought something, my impression, or what I hope anyway, is that that person is sitting in this chair, and at the end of the day, maybe she's just can escape for a moment. Maybe he's looking at a painting that we sold him, he disappears for just a fleeting moment. And from all the chaos that we see day to day on social media or on television, wherever we are, we can just find some sort of equanimity in that moment. Wearing a beautiful dress that you know is where its origin, made for you, or a beautiful piece of art that you've created that they can be around. Just for that fleeting moment, maybe everything's all right with the world. Just then. Before the chaos, before you hear that.
That's why art.
like Victor says, it is you can feel heroic, and it makes you feel heroic. It makes you it can either sort of transport you from yourself, or it can make you feel absolutely yourself for that moment when you need to sit in a chair with a microphone in your
But it
hand.
won't happen unless that object is the right thing.
Yeah.
That it's not a reproduction or
Generic.
generic. It's the right one.
I'll say this too, we talk about investment. I don't think you buy clothes or you buy furniture thinking it's going to go up in value. If that's the way you're thinking of an investment, it happens sometimes, but that's not why you should be buying it. When you go out and spend, I tell clients this all the time, you spend $150,000 on a Mercedes and you have 3 of them sitting in the driveway, did you expect that to be an investment? Because in 3 years, you can't get $30,000 for that car, but you sure love driving. Well, furniture's that way too. I mean, the world changes, things become more valuable for a while, and sometimes they become a lot less valuable. But you shouldn't buy it because of it being an investment. It's an investment in your lifestyle and living with it. And if you have it for 10 years, you had the car for 3 years and it's worth $30,000. You're sitting in that chair for the next 15 years. Enjoy it. If you sell it for $100 later, because I've had to go through this with clients who bought expensive stuff 20, 15, 16 years ago and are now being told they might get $5,000 for something they spent $80,000 for. You bought it, you used it for 15 years, your house was beautiful, you lived well, people loved it. Wasn't that the investment that really why you should have been buying it?
You need to rent it.
It's like an emotional
Well,
Yes,
investment
an
of
emotional investment. Exactly.
quality of life. No?
Absolutely. I'm aware. I want to make sure that we have time for questions. Helen, will you give me a?
Yep, for
I have no watch under these sleeves.
Probably about another
My
5
phone.
or 10 minutes.
Lovely.
Any questions?
Well, I want to. I keep trying to ask the questions because I really want you to. So, Elena, back again to
Yes.
just about the reuse and now we sort of talk about upcycling, but in the past that wasn't really how it was thought of. Clothing was, as you said, a significant investment. I keep using the word, but it was a significant financial investment for people. And so we were talking the other day about how clothing was passed on. How was it passed on? Who were the sorts of people that would use second-hand clothing and would benefit from it? How would it be used?
Well, everyone, really. I mean, I think back to, I've done a lot of research into lace collecting in the Victorian period extending into the early 20th century. And it was really incredibly fashionable to buy and collect antique laces. The Astors, the Vanderbilts, everybody did it. And these were things that cost more and were considered more valuable from the 17th and 18th century than something of equivalent quality, handmade, brand new. So it was substantially more expensive to buy antique. And they would buy these things and just completely, I'm sorry to say, chop them up and remake them into the current silhouette of the day, because they use these as modern goods. Like, they use them like they were just part of their wardrobe.
Yeah.
And I would never advocate for anyone to buy antique lace and, remake it into a new silhouette. However, I think there's something to be said for that mentality of using secondhand, antique, whatever, vintage goods as an option alongside treating them the same as you would couture or ready-to-wear options, and something bought new. And I think the other thing is that upcycling is the current term for something that has happened since the dawn of textiles. There's nary a textile in a museum that doesn't have some sort of mend on it. And the more valuable it is, the more mends you will see, because people really cared to keep it for longer in history. That's why they survive for in some cases, thousands of years. And so we shouldn't be afraid to wear things that are mended, or to repair things or tailor things if our bodies change. And I know we also talked a little bit about sort of how clothing today doesn't have seam allowances, and that can be a really big issue too, that you can't alter things anymore. So I think there's really a shift today, especially during the pandemic, of people, many brands that have come out. In fact, I'm wearing a custom-made blouse out of vintage tablecloths. And so I had, I thought it was appropriate for today, but there's been a big trend in quilt coats and things like that. And wherever you fall in terms of your opinion on what should be cut or what should not be cut, I will not address that. That is for another debate. But I think it is really notable that people are drawn to these things that take time to make and that are valuable, and because of their age and quality, that you just can't get brand new.
Can I make a comment?
Please.
I noticed the ketchup stain on your dress. I'm just joking. You said it was a tablecloth.
Shame on you.
There might be one. I wouldn't be ashamed if there was.
You know-
I used to always say when I worked in vintage archives, I said it was a vintage stamp.
I'm just kidding. It's a fabulous movie.
Thank you.
But Albert Hadley, who was one of the great designers, was known for reusing things. Most of us, I very seldom, if I've had a client for 20 years and I've done 3 houses for them, do you think we just throw everything away? Very seldom. I mean, I've had 1 or 2 clients that would do that. I have a client right now that had the most beautiful furniture, and she didn't understand that I could make that work in their new house, which was a modern house in Palm Springs rather than a house in Napa Valley. It would have been a fabulous house. Instead, she's dumping all this stuff for nothing that could have made that house really special. And it could have worked in a modern house used a different way. But I couldn't make her understand that. So what we're doing to this house is embarrassing when it shouldn't have been. She had all these beautiful things that could have been used. For years, people come to us, do you think that we redo a house and it goes from scratch? I don't think I've ever redone a house for a client except this one, where we didn't reuse so many things that were in that house. Sometimes it's to save money. Sometimes it's just because they're beautiful.
And they're an expression of their owner.
Right, and so you treat them a different way. You use them I can put an 18th century secretary in a modern room and make it look good. Make it look more special than just another modern room. I have a friend who's a big designer in California, and she was asked a question about antiques and things. She said, well, I always make sure that there's something old in that room other than me. And so, what it does sometimes is give a room character and some warmth. Even in a room that's all white with big, long, white, 60-inch deep sofas, something that has a little age and a little color gives the room a little patina. So, to throw all this stuff out that was so beautiful, to buy stuff that isn't so beautiful, to me was a huge mistake, and it could have made the house really special. It's just a nice house.
I think we all need a little patina. I think it's part of what makes us all special.
Really special.
I'd love to open it up,
Questions,
if I
yeah.
may, to questions.
Does
from
anyone
the
have any
audience.
questions? I can bring the mic over, or I
Please
can
don't
repeat
be
it.
shy.
Patrick's sister said she had a question.
I have a question for you. My sister Christina, you're involved in supply chain,
I am
right? And it's the backlog goes on for almost years now, right?
It's true. It's funny when you were talking about the supply chains and it's funny when you were talking about supply chain issues. I do work in that field, and yeah, there really is no shortage in sight. I mean, we are looking into 2025 and beyond. So start upcycling and recycling.
I just heard that Miele is not even taking orders anymore for
Really?
dishwashers and everything. So I mean, you know,
Go figure.
I think that's why it's important to support local.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
And me, I do, whatever we do is all in New York. I try to find the people that they used to do it before, let's do it back.
Bravo.
You know.
Good for you.
Even we started with my partner, a beauty line, the same. Because then you're waiting for like overseas. And then it's a problem with this, problem with that. You know, first, yeah, you don't know what's in it either. So support local first. If you don't find the one, you go to other
And wait until
areas.
2025.
I have a question. It's very different. All of you have kind of different expertise, but you were talking about color, you were talking about form, talking about history. For each of you, when you're approaching a new project, I'd be very interested to understand what's the starting point for you? Is it the form? Is it the color? Is it the feeling? Just getting a sense of what kind of gets each of you to get that spark to move.
We'll go in order, Helen.
Oh dear, I was like, I hope I have more time to
That's your
think.
point.
It's okay. No, it's fine, it's fine. Well, I mean, I'm a historian, but I'm also, my background is as a fashion designer and a maker. So I come to history from a maker background. So for me, in current projects, you know, everything that I do is always tying those things together. So when I'm doing a making project, I always bring like a historical context into it, and when I'm doing a historical project, I always bring a sort of contemporary lens to it in order to tie it to today, to make it feel relevant. So I think for me it's just my starting point is finding a balance between old and new, because what's old is always new and it's always relevant.
Rachel?
For me, I always start from an idea that came to my mind, and I was like, oh, how interesting that mix with that music, and then always come back to a fashion show. Because, you know, for fashion is the best way to explain a narrative, no? And then that idea kind of goes away, and then for me it's like putting this puzzle together, and that's when I start putting material first. Then shapes that I see, it's like, oh, this is kind of what I get that idea. Oh, okay, blue, that's what it goes into that. But it's like a work of putting a puzzle together from one first idea. I don't know where it came from, but yeah.
Patrick?
From my standpoint, we're not looking really to create a project, but looking for acquisition. And we are never looking for anything. We're looking what happens, things present themselves. And we, having been in business as long as we have been, which is close to 60 years, we are contacted on more than just a regular basis about things that we've sold and they want to sell back, or someone's passed away. And it's a steady stream of just sort of mediocre goods. And not to diminish the sentiment of them, but it's just stuff. And every once in a while, there is something at an auction or a private sale, we're contacted by somebody who has that thing, just separates it and sets it apart. And I could give you any number of examples, but I can tell you every object for sale in this building today, some dealer has thought just that. Something about that object has made them think, this is different, this is extraordinary, and I will take it across the planet to bring it to Barney's or down the street or up the street to Barney's, because it sparks something. And I don't know what it is all the time, but I think there's always some narrative that just says, I don't know what that is, and this could be a huge mistake, right? Because it could very well be something not interesting at all. I've sadly made that mistake on more than one occasion. But I've also been enriched and enlightened by objects that I know nothing about. And I'm humbled by my own business. I'm humbled daily. Nobody when I walk through this building, I'm humbled by what I don't know about most things. Of fashion for one, and then ceramics and textiles and everything else. And it's a real privilege and thrill to be involved.
Edward.
You know, I'm sure every interior designer does this differently. I think for me, every design starts with sitting and talking to the client, learning what they want, what they like, getting an understanding of how they live. But the one thing that's important is you need to find a hook. Every project has a hook. Let's say that it's one chair, but that one chair begins to tell the whole story of the house. Or whether it's a rug, or sometimes it's a color. But you have to have everything as a hook. So you need that first thing that some client likes that begins to tell the whole story and create the whole house.
Fantastic.
That's interesting because to have a full look, you always have to start from, oh, I want to wear, I don't know, that hat. So then you start putting the hat. It's the same process of dressing a house, dressing a person. Interesting.
Guys, it's a vibe
I
shift.
never put it together. Thank you.
Bring it full circle.
Does anyone else have any questions?
Don't be shy.
I do.
Here we go.
Yes.
Sorry.
She's the Misha.
So I would be curious to know from each of you, what is one thing either in fashion or furniture or in design that you personally would take with you, like if you had to travel? So, you know, if there's one, if you could pick one thing, what would it be?
Lighting a fire.
And from like the fashion sense, what's the most important thing to you? And same thing from design and from furniture. Like, what you consider to be the most important.
I can tell you, from my standpoint, it would be my reference collection of books on English furniture. I mean, it's extensive, and it tells me everything I need to know, because there's no one object that I could truly just commit to, but I can commit to the reference to every object under the sun.
Okay, that's not bad.
You know,
I
it's
do think
fun.
there are any wrong answers on that.
There are, but I think everybody, you know, it's funny, I love clothes. I have a lot of clothes. And I have 3,000 books. There are certain things that, I have one chair that if I had to move, I had to sell everything else, I would keep. Years ago when I liquidated everything and started over, I kept one drawing of an industrial plant in South Georgia that I bought 30 years ago. That's the only thing I kept from everything. So there's certain things, and I have certain clothes that if I had to go, I go to Florida a lot because I live there. And there's one jacket that I know I've had it for 10 years. I take it every single time because it goes with everything. And I happen to love the jacket and I think I look good in it. So, you know, and that's part of the idea of looking at it. So, you know, yes, there's one jacket that I would take with me. And someone asked me, and I don't have it on today, but someone asked me one time, what's the one thing you couldn't live without? And I said, my Gerard Perregaux watch. It's that simple.
They seem like slightly more portable items than the.
It's easier to do that than move a sofa.
Victor.
For me, the thing that I value the most is my patterns, my paper patterns. Because, I don't know, I've been working in this jacket for 10 years. Now it's like perfection, but it came all from this process of patterns. I will take the last patterns of everything. And then I have a teddy bear that I've been carrying from I was a kid, Fernando.
Oh.
He knows that. It's not glamorous, but
And he has his
I'm
own
not-
career. The teddy
What?
bear. So the teddy bear has his own career in life.
Fantastic.
yeah, we see the same style in movies or in like, I don't know, it's a classic. That's it.
What are you taking with you?
Okay, I think there's two answers happening here, because one of them is sort of like what would you always take with you to travel, and one is sort of like what would you save in your home.
We're gathering that you're
Yes.
allowed 2 items.
Okay. So I think we're saying different things. So the thing that I always travel with, it's really hard. I spend a lot of time thinking about what I will pack when I travel. But recently I've always been packing these Margiela Tabi boots because I love something really loud and power clashing with everything, and they do that very well. So that's my one item to pack. I know it's not antique, but I have many of those things too.
Nobody said antique.
Okay.
How old is Fernando? We don't know. We didn't ask.
So, but the thing that I would say to the fire
He's a
thing
digger.
would either be my wedding dress, which was like 1890s Irish crochet lace gown. Because of when are you going to buy an antique lace gown for yourself that's handmade at your wedding? So,
Right, really.
and everyone thought I was going to make it. Absolutely not. Give me 10 years. No, I didn't have time. Or it would be, I've inherited a lot of textiles, which is where I got my interest in textiles. My family is Amish and Mennonite. So I have quilts and heirlooms from my family that are really precious. So I think that would be even more than my wedding dress. Ugh, I would have to save those.
That's
I get
not very,
that.
that's not very
What about you?
emergency escape.
I think, well, so part one of the question, part A, I have a pair of earrings. Actually, Christina will know exactly the ones. I have these very large tortoiseshell Angela Caputi. I mean, they're not actual tortoiseshell. She calls them resin. I think the rest of us call them plastic. But they're massive. They're almost down to my shoulders, and they're what I put on for, particularly during the pandemic when I was, working with. I had to come back to work with a new baby on my lap, and it was all a bit. And I was having to feed her because we had no childcare yet, because you couldn't have anyone in your home, and nothing was open. I could put those earrings on in my terrible t-shirt and jeans, and be Zoom camera ready. They're still always my go-to. Was I wearing them when we? Oh no, I wore the silver ones.
But the Venetian tassel inspired you. I loved
I wore those
great
things.
things.
But so those would be my grab and carry. And I think I'm going to have to go for my wedding dress as well, because it's the most I've ever spent on an item of clothing.
Same here.
Yeah. And I wore, when I got married, my husband's just around there actually. We'd been together for some time. And so, I wasn't going to wear a white dress, and also I look terrible in white because I don't care. So I went to see a vintage dealer, and tried on tons of things, and she said, we'll just try lots of things, and then I'll sort of put the word out with all the dealers that I know once I get an idea of your style, and we'll start looking for something. And she had this Oscar de la Renta emerald green gown that looked like a pair of curtains. And it was so funny on the rail. I said, well, I want to try it on. I mean, it looks hideous, but I want to try it on just to see how a couture gown like that would fit, and basically to make myself laugh. And I came out in it, and it did make me laugh. And I thought, actually, that's it. That's the one. That's the one. To be able to walk out and look at yourself in the mirror and make yourself laugh, so right, okay, there we are. That's what I'm getting married in. So that's what I would take.
Good for you. I like that.
Well, thank you all very much. If there are no other questions, I would like to give a round of applause to our panelists.